I'm going to start off this episode by taking you behind the scenes of this incredibly complex operation I have going on. And it all starts with me clicking on my web browser and looking at my bookmarks, my recent bookmarks. And these two are jumping out at me. My husband wants to date my mother. Help. From the polyamory subreddit. The title of this is, At Anti-Bullying Conference, Iowa middle schoolers learn about lesbian strap-on anal sex, fake testicles. What else can I say? There's really nothing I can add. Nothing. These say everything you need to know. At any other time, on any other day that I sit down to record this, to do this show, I would read through these no problem and give my thoughts. But I need a break. You need a break. It's not healthy to stare into the abyss constantly. It's possible, but, well, you might die. You might have some very significant health problems coming from that. But I need a break. You need a break. We can't do this all the time. So I'm going to play for you a clip off of my award-winning video album, Tumblrista's Raw Volume 2. I find it so beautiful that humans can change gender. Really, it's incredible, and it shows that humans are humans. Whatever gender we are or are not, we can be anything or anyone. Every human should have the right to choose their gender because there is nothing more beautiful than someone becoming who they truly are. To absolutely no surprise, the girl that wrote that post that I read, she has green hair and she is white. And you're not going to find too much diversity of opinion amongst people with green hair and amongst people who happen to be white females. To them, everything is beautiful. And I have my suspicions as to why that's the case. Because these girls, while they're attractive, they're not runway model attractive or bikini model attractive. They're everyday girl next door kind of attractive. And I think to some level they know this, but they think it's not good enough. So they want to promote all of these things that really aren't beautiful, but what happens is that in making these ugly things beautiful, they make themselves look better by comparison. Why do you think they all want men to be transgender? Because they know that men could not possibly look good, even at their best as women. Even if they tried their hardest, they could not possibly look as good as an average woman. And that's why they promote this. They don't say things are beautiful because they actually are. They say things are beautiful because they think they're not beautiful enough. They're not pretty enough. It's not like these girls are going to better themselves in some other way. They feel like they're not pretty enough. Well, maybe you should have a better attitude. That goes a long way. A positive attitude goes such a long way when it comes to female attractiveness. Make other things look worse to make yourself look better. It's a lot easier to do that than to actually become better yourself. But let's assume that I'm looking too much into this. Let's assume that there is no ulterior motive. What is beauty? I think the best definition of beauty is that which inspires life through aesthetics. And not just life, but quality of life. Good life. I've been meaning to bring this up for the last couple of weeks, but other things came up and those were more important. But over the last, I don't know how long, I've been seeing all of this bullshit about how this is beautiful, that's beautiful, and wow, just wow, so inspiring. Notably, this girl with Down syndrome who lost weight and became a model. And all of these girls clapping their hands like seals. This is so beautiful, so inspiring. Oh my god. You know? Maybe I'm wrong about these people, these cheerleaders, having ulterior motives, but when I see that sort of reaction to a model with Down syndrome, I can't imagine that there's anything but ulterior motive involved. I just searched it, Down syndrome model, and found this article from Mashable.com, a horrible source of filth. Teen model with Down syndrome is the true meaning of beautiful, by somebody named Jenny Ryle. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but whatever. Doesn't matter. And there's a picture of the author. A plain Jane white woman. I don't know, I think my hypothesis here is being proven correct. That the people behind this shit are moderately, slightly attractive white women who want to look better by comparison. And she does. Because there's a picture of this girl with Down syndrome and there's a picture of her. One looks able-bodied, the other does not. Now, this is to say nothing bad about Down syndrome people. I think that people who mistreat the disabled are the biggest pieces of shit in the world. Second only to the author of this article, and people like her. Subhumans like her. Meet the true meaning of beautiful. To Jenny here, Mashable author. Beautiful is something that makes you look good, without actually having to put any effort into anything. Look, I have the right opinion. Aren't I a good person? This is beautiful. Again, how can there be anything but ulterior motive? But what does it mean? I wouldn't care as much if these people didn't wield any influence, if these people weren't gatekeepers for so many institutions. But they are. They vote. They infect the culture with AIDS and every other disease you can think of. And having herpes and AIDS is beautiful because there's nothing more beautiful than somebody becoming who they truly are. This is the culture you live in, where those that chop off their cocks and put rubber bags into their chest, that's beautiful. And last week I started off with a question asking if there was anything that I've come across that is just too disturbing to share. Well, a day or two after I had released last week's episode, I did find something. I did find something that I will never share with anybody. Anybody who I actually like. And this thing was a video that somebody posted on 8chan's poll. And it was footage of some crazy guy getting his cock removed. And I nearly threw up. I should not have watched it because it did some damage to my soul that I don't think can be undone. But I saved it because should it come to this point, I would like to show it to some golden retriever girls like the one that works for Mashable, to show them just how beautiful becoming who you truly are really is. Pieces of shit, all of them. This is what's beautiful to you. A man mutilating himself. And people getting paid to do it. People going to school for a better part of a decade for the privilege of doing so. That's beautiful. Beauty is somebody desecrating themselves and giving themselves a new name. Pissing on the grave of their ancestors in more ways than one. Because it's one thing to not want to have kids in a world such as this. It is one thing to not want to either create evil or create victims to evil. I fully understand people that don't want to have children, given the state of things. But wanting to remove your reproductive capacity for the sake of becoming who you truly are, that's a different beast altogether. Wanting to change your name because there's nothing real about a name. Let me tell you something. Collecting vines for Vine Marathon Volume 4 has made me think about this. This notion of trans people are just becoming who they are and there's nothing real about your name. That name isn't who I am. Well, I was named after my great-grandfather. My great-grandfather, even though he died when I was very young, but I do remember attending his funeral and I do remember meeting him one time before that, he is one of 8 people of that generation responsible for my existence. He is one of 8 people whose blood is running through my veins. And this goes for anybody, even if they aren't named after their great-grandparents or grandparents or whatever. They are quite literally you. Without them, you would not exist. What did I say before? How creationists have a more thorough practical knowledge of biology, anatomy, and the people who don't believe in God, they think that this shit is magic. Fucking childbirth, how does it work? If people believe that the earth is thousands of years old as opposed to millions of years old, what changes? Nothing. Nothing changes. If people think that this is not who I am, this is not my name, I'm going to chop off my dick, a lot changes. Life would cease to exist. It's a death cult. But there's nothing more beautiful than that, apparently. Am I right? Whatever the fuck your name was from Mashable. Down syndrome models and bearded brides. That's what makes the world go around. That's what makes the sun rise in the morning. That's what makes the sun set at night. That's what makes the grass grow. So with that being said, it's time for questions, and we'll do Reddit questions first. Hey CF, and this is from Nazi Bar Mitzvah. I'm heading to college this September, and as someone who is aware of the liberal mud tolerance horseshit, and living in Southern California, it's not that exciting. My first question is what would be a useful skill to apply to society? I would prefer something involving my hands, real labor, and although I've wanted to be a writer for as long as I can remember, I don't want to waste time with useless English courses, nor want to be around pathetic, smug, liberal faggots. Also, on episode 47, I was the Ask FM user who asked you about the Northwest Front, and you replied that it couldn't work in that region. So for my second question, what do you think people in the alternative right should do to save, or at least salvage, what is left of Western civilization? God bless. I'm really straining to think what can be studied at college that involves a lot of manual labor. And if it's junior colleges often have trade programs of all sorts. They have, HVAC certification, car repair, things like that. I really don't know what you're going to find at college that is going to fall within what you want your skill set to be. And as for English classes, beyond your bullshit prerequisite, here's how to have the right opinions classes, you're not going to learn how to be a better anything by taking English classes. You're really not. The best way to become a good writer is to live life and to actually write, not learn how to write from somebody who doesn't have a career as a writer. Life is what art is made of, and you're not going to be a good artist by living life in a classroom. It's just not going to happen. And I suspect that this is why the best classes I ever had, the most interesting, informative classes that I've ever had, were taught by people that did it part-time or did it for fun. They had something else going on other than, I like to teach. The worst classes I had were from people who were career teachers, career professors. If they're such great fucking whatever it is they're teaching, why don't they have a job doing it? Nobody asks themselves this question. They think that somebody's teaching the subject, that means they automatically know a lot about it, when that is most of the time not the case at all. So if you're looking for a skill that will have some practical use to society, be a plumber, be an electrician. Because anybody who lives in a home, a house, apartment, whatever, they have a toilet, they have a sink, they have light bulbs. And I know that people like to brag about their kids having a certain occupation, but you know what? It isn't their occupation, it isn't their living. It's not for them to brag about. It's not for them to use as some social signaling tool. People mistake activity for achievement now more than ever because of social media. It's all anybody wants, something to brag about, and it's fucking pathetic. I think that doing all these things and achieving nothing is far more pathetic than actually being of some use to society. But nobody sees it that way. There's so many fucking people out there that everybody can cover for each other's mistakes. Just throw some money at it. Watch late night TV, late night local TV, very late night, and realize how many unskilled people there are out there. Their only skill is covering their own ass. Watch infomercials and realize the talking heads on these infomercials, they can't do shit. The only thing they know how to do is sell themselves. And once you see through the bullshit, you realize how many people out there are pathetic and weak, and they don't realize it. And that's why they have no humility. And apply this line of reasoning to anybody in most of any profession that anybody's in. Realize that society is doing them a favor. And notice how they act. They don't act grateful that they have a career doing some bullshit. They think they do the most important thing in the world. They think they make the grass grow. They think they make the sun rise. But going back to your question, and I'll get to the part what we can do to save Western civilization or salvage it. I'm not saying that there are no useful skills to be learned in college. There are. But very little of it involves manual labor. And anybody can feel free to correct me on that, but I'm drawing a blank, I really am. As for how we salvage civilization, I've been trying to figure that out now for 49 episodes. I really don't know, and I wish I did. Alright, next up is from It's Like Another Shower. What's your overall opinion of Wikipedia? Do you think it is very reliable? Not at all. Not for anything of consequence. For pop culture bullshit, it's fine, but no, not reliable in the least. And I think the most prime example of that is their article for Sodom and Gomorrah, which I won't read right now, but just one of many examples why I dislike Wikipedia more than I like it. Next up is from Joseph, not a Slav. Hey man, I'm from Estonia, which is so far mostly untainted by the bullshit propagated in most of the Western world. However, I'm worried that things might not stay that way for long. While the older generation who lived during the Soviet era is very much against things like gay marriage and race mixing, younger people, mostly those in their 20s to 30s, are very positive towards those ideas. They seem to hold this widespread idea of, hey, let's all be friends and sing happy songs, etc. As always, thanks for doing what you're doing. It helps me keep in mind that things here might change drastically at any moment if we're not careful. What I want people to understand about American culture is that we are completely subservient to money, to capital, and we will sacrifice basically everything in order to get ahead. And this worshipping that Americans do at the altar of money, of greed, of excess. It has made us very successful economically, but I'm lying when I say American culture. It's really an anti-culture. Because culture encourages you to form bonds and be loyal. Be loyal to those who value what you value. But in America, nobody values shit. To people on the outside looking in around the world, they look at America and say, wow, Americans have so much money. I want the life of an American. Life would be so much easier. To people in less wealthy countries, that's very appealing. And I understand that appeal. But what people have to understand is that in that quest for money, the most amount of money you could possibly get is everything else. Your soul, your family, personal integrity. That's not apparent to people around the world who just look at their situation, look at America's situation and say, I want some of that. I want some of that money because my life would be easier. American culture, anti-culture, is a virus that needs to be eradicated. But I don't see that happening anytime soon as long as wealth is associated with it. Next is from Greasy Comb. Let's say you lived in California. Do you think someone is relatively safe there compared to other places right now in the US? California being sort of the hub of liberalism, aside from maybe New York. Do you think it fosters danger? Well, I live in California, the hub of not only liberalism, but American anti-culture and diversity. I actually think that in the long run, 10, 20 years, California will be a safer place since a place like Minnesota, who seems hell-bent on replacing the native population with Somalians. And I'll take Mexicans over Somalians 100 times out of 100. And I think the powers that be will hold off on importing a bunch of Somalians here to California because we already have the cloak of diversity to protect us from that, as odious as it may be. But you always take the evil that you know over the evil that you're unfamiliar with. It's already happening in quote-unquote flyover states, this importing of refugees into these relatively small, mostly white locations. And what gets done about it? Nothing. Because whites have lost the will to live. They will not defend themselves. They're still under the impression that these problems can be voted away. They think that once Obama leaves office, everything's gonna automatically become better. But the trouble will really only have just begun. So, I don't think that California is that bad, honestly. Just in terms of personal safety, anyway. My main problem with this fucking place is not the fact that I'm unsafe here. It's the fact that the worst people live here. Because we are the most populated state, you get the most mediocre fucking people on the planet. On the other hand, you get the craziest people on the planet. You get the stupidest. These people who are still hippies for some fucking reason that think that plastic bags are what's killing the environment, but, mass immigration has nothing to do with environment. Nah, not at all. Or that, these same hippie type of people, they believe that chickens deserve human rights. Chickens are assholes. Fuck chickens. And fuck California too. Okay, next from Video Game Massa. I came from a Catholic family, but I have certain disagreements with the fact of being saved by faith alone. I mean, I can understand that in Christianity, human efforts are corruptible, and thus not a good way to reach God, and thus needing the intervention of Jesus for reaching God. However, my problem with being saved by faith alone is this one. You can ask for forgiveness, but then some of them will just use that as an excuse for making bad things, like being a horrible human being, but as long as you ask forgiveness from Jesus, you're fine. Instead, in the Catholic model, saved by doing good works, at least you needed to do stuff in order to being worthy of getting into heaven. And thus, the Catholic model seems like a better model, in my opinion, than just faith alone. Although combining faith and works is the best way. So my question is, what do you think about the two models and which one is better in your opinion? Well, like you said, somebody can do work, but that work can be corrupted. For example, somebody does charity work, only to funnel most of the money for themselves, funnel most of the money into their own bank accounts. I mean, that's a work, and maybe they do some little bit of good, but their heart is in a bad place. So I think that faith should come first, and through your heart being changed by faith, you do works that are coming from a pure, decent place. And you say the problem with by faith alone is that people can ask for forgiveness despite the fact that they act like a jackass most of the time. Well, I'm of the opinion that God is not stupid. God can see right through their bullshit. God can see right through people's bullshit where they say, I'm just going to behave however I want and Jesus will forgive me. Well, the whole point of having faith in Christ is to be more like Christ. You will fall short. You definitely will fall short. But falling short does not mean that you should not try. You should try. So I'm of the opinion that these things should not exist independent of one another, because when they're independent of one another, they can be abused, and they often are. But again, God sees through the bullshit. God sees what's really in your heart. And the second question here, what kind of food do you prefer, considering that some people are scared that the food that we have now has more artificial stuff put in them and GMO? Also, what do you think of GMOs in general, or your experience with them? Well, thankfully, I was fed not this processed baby food when I was a baby. My mother, she actually made all my baby food from stuff that was grown without genetic modification. So I think a lot of kids growing up now, why they think they're gay or trans or whatever, is because they were fed this bullshit early on. Because I don't think any of us have avoided the GMO trap later in life, but we do have some resistance built up to that. And we don't interpret our emotional instability in adolescence as, oh, this must mean I'm a boy or this must mean I'm a girl. But as for what kind of food I prefer, I like all kinds of food, but it's not something that I think about too much. And the next one, this might seem like a controversial question, but here it is. Normally people have this idea that we shouldn't play God or experiment with nature because it will fuck with us at the end of the day. However, we couldn't have gotten this far if we didn't make experiments with nature, humans, resources, and many of the other things, which has given us the joys we have now: technology, medicine, cleaner surgery, food that lasts longer, and laws, theories that give us a better understanding of the world. So my question is this: do you think there is a point where we humans have to stop just not to fuck nature because of the shit we've done, or shall we continue to keep researching and experimenting just so that we can improve our lives in the future, even if that means having to do some risks? Well, I guess it would depend on what your definition of playing God is. Because I'm not opposed to medicine, but I am opposed to certain kinds of medicine and how they are used. I'm not opposed to surgery as a whole, but I'm definitely opposed to surgeries that impair and mutilate rather than help. Society gains nothing when somebody decides to get surgery to have their penis and testicles removed. Going back to what I was referencing earlier, that video I saw. I mean, the guy that's doing it, you might be getting paid a lot of money, but really, what good is it doing society other than, oh, I'm profiting off of the mentally ill? I'd argue that we aren't playing God, because God, in the end, serves the greater good. We're playing Satan. We are Satan, and that's what I think about it. For considering all the evils that we have, and let's view this in place, let's say that you can rid of almost all of them but one. So which do you think would be the lesser evil to have in this world? Examples: greed, gays, violent behavior, race mixing, tumblerinas, corruption, lying. Can be anything really. Violent behavior is the one that I would keep, because you can deal with that. You can deal with that very easily. And was it really 6 million? I really don't know the actual number of that incident. Well, considering that 6 million Jews didn't even exist in Europe at that time, it isn't 6 million. It's impossible. Okay, next is from Caffeine33. Do you know, / what do you think about Julie Borowski? Is she too cuckbertarian? Thanks, God bless, keep fighting the good fight. I know who she is, but I have no opinion on her. I really don't. She's a mainstream pundit, that's where she makes her money, and good for her. I really have nothing to say about it either way. And this is from, I'm gonna say all the numbers in the screen name. 135. That's boring, fuck it. What do you think of Trump's campaign? Well, I think that he's a firebrand. I think that it's refreshing how he doesn't take any shit from anybody, that he doesn't apologize for shit. But I think we should temper our enthusiasm because I think one of his kids converted to Judaism, and all of her kids are Jews because she married one. So, yeah, that's a little bit weird. That seems to fall right in line with the conservative narrative. So, something to keep in mind. Something to consider. Let's do email questions. Emails from... This one's from Anon. Thank you for your continued work on the show. I hope you're doing well. In my last email, I briefly alluded to one aspect of cultural decay that I believe I have some insight into that perhaps you have not noticed. It is simply that the cultural decay we witness is not limited to just moral and spiritual issues, but even shows itself in the depth of technical knowledge and abilities of the population. Reading news, one would think that all aspects of science and technology are developing more rapidly than ever before. I bear witness to the contrary. It's true that certain areas of technology continue to be developed and that we find more applications for existing technologies, namely computers and the internet. However, through my work, it seems obvious to me that there are whole realms of knowledge that have either atrophied or are simply gone. These are not just obscure technologies no longer needed, but in some cases segments of science and engineering that we still rely on for our modern world. Without going into too much personal information about my life, I had previously indicated that I saw more people entering my field who lacked even a basic understanding of fundamentals. A portion of my work could be summed up as gathering samples in an intelligent manner, analyzing those samples, performing basic statistical analysis, and making a judgment. The scary part is that the judgments I make will sometimes have life and death consequences attached to them. Many in the profession now simply gather and interpret data following established formulas. We call this push-button get banana thinking. These individuals have no deeper understanding of what they are doing and just want a simple niche they can fit in without much effort. Those skilled and knowledgeable enough to deal with abnormal situations are becoming fewer. I'm ashamed to say that for all the modern software programs we have, I still find myself in awe at the accomplishments that someone who died long ago was able to do with sheer technical knowledge and mental ability. Many analytical methods and technology that did not rely on a computer controlling every aspect of the process are now lost, and more are lost all the time. In some ways, our institutions have picked up on this, and the day-to-day activities of people in my profession are getting more and more regulated. Not regulated to stop abuses, but regulated to create narrow pathways that imbeciles can't deviate from. Believe me when I say that there are portions of our modern infrastructure that will become unmaintainable without significant loss of human life within another generation or two. Our population is apparently already too stupid to do many of these things without getting someone killed, and all we hear in the news is some accident that may result in more regulation. While we attach computers and programmable interfaces to everything, the actual technology we're using hasn't been further developed in over 40 years. The theories and math that underpin what we do are now viewed as arcane secrets by most who should know better. One could argue that it was always a talented few leading the masses, but so much of what I see and work with would simply not be rebuilt or rediscovered if it were lost today, and so much of it is still being used to make modern life livable. Perhaps I'm too negative, but from my little corner of the world, it reeks of decay. I read a quote from somebody some time ago. It went something along the lines of, the generation without computers in the classroom were able to put a man on the moon. Yet the generation with computers in the classroom invented Facebook. Again, people mistake activity for achievement. We have all this great technology, all of this capacity in our computers to do all of these things. Yet, ultimately, what are computers to most people? What are cell phones? What are tablets? They're essentially mirrors that talk back. It's not the technology, it's the people. It is not technology that makes us great. It is people who make us great. And people now are not great. They're not good. And what's worse is that they wallow in it. They don't allow themselves to be led by the good or the great. So with this in mind, nothing in your email is particularly surprising, even though you have a lot more insight than the rest of us. And you're on the front lines of it, closer to the front lines of what is to become of civilization on its current path. But even though nothing that you're observing in your daily life is surprising, it's still incredibly worrying. And I hope people take note. I really hope that people are listening to that. Next up is from Eterius. I've been enjoying your radio shows as I've been steadily working my way through them the past few weeks, and as I write this email, the outro music for episode 37 is playing. I've yet to see up to episode 38, so I hope you'll forgive me if you had mentioned these things in the next few episodes. One of the saddest things I've encountered on Tumblr is the example of Actually Divine. Given the style of their posts and the occasional confession of professional medical examination, some of them seem to be legitimately mentally ill. Throughout your show, you allude to the fact that equality is a hazardous notion to follow through on and consider such things as bug chasing to be a prime example. These Tumblr posts above make it seem like equality would in fact force people to accept mental illnesses as the norm and pretend they do not need medical attention. Indeed, often they're celebrated for being godkin or angelkin or what have you. Well, I am not familiar with this at all, actually. Godkin and angelkin. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I did say that certain people see themselves as gods, that they see themselves as above all criticism. And they seem to be having something in common with the Tumblr proles. Actually Divine, Godkin, Angelkin. Yeah, I'm gonna have to investigate this further. And then the other part of this email. I've thought for a while that John B. Calhoun's experiments on rat and mouse utopias were a fitting prediction for the current course of the West. His observations were that when there were no predators and limited space, as a population grows above sustainable sizes, males become passive and tend to become selfish and groom themselves more, while females became far more aggressive. This trend led to no reproduction, and the mice died off. This pattern is similar to what is happening today with the soy calf latte drinking skinny jean hipsters in the inner city areas and feminists, and further with MGTOW avoiding reproduction. Yeah, Stefan Molyneux actually drew a comparison between the MGTOW people and the beautiful ones in the rat experiments. And by the way, I do highly recommend that everyone goes over to Stefan Molyneux's channel and watches his Gene Wars series. It's great. It'll explain a lot of what we deal with here. All right, next up. Hey, Common Filth, just want to start by saying thanks for doing what you do. Your words give voice to what many people from all over the world, from all walks of life think, but are unable to say in this day and age. I'll try to keep everything compacted and shortened the best I can, but feel free to break it up into parts. I know you've discussed interracial relationships on the show before, but I wanted to know your opinions on my personal situation. I'm an almost daily a non-poster on Pull and have been since it was still new. So I know about white birth rates and the general opinions that go along with interracial dating and marriage. To begin with, I'm a white guy in his mid-20s who has been in a relationship with my Japanese-American girlfriend for 7.5 years. Her dad is third generation, and her mom legally immigrated here to the US in her early 20s. Her mom has had a strong influence on her, so she isn't like anything like the dime a dozen golden retriever white girls these days. She strives to make herself a better person spiritually, we're both Christians, and mentally, and even in small ways such as learning new recipes to improve her cooking. She tries, which is more than can be said for most women these days. I dated my share of white girls in the mid-2000s, but they were what you would expect proto-SJWs, progressives, feminists before the movements took off in the late 2000s. They either preached the same bullshit we're both used to hearing from these people, or were quick to try and take things into the bed. Something I thank God every day I never gave into. In short, I met my girlfriend in early 2008. Neither of us had ever had a real relationship before each other, and over the months we became each other's firsts in every way possible. 7.5 years and a few foundation-shaking events later, nothing revolting, infidelity, or the like. We're still together and will likely be married by this time next year, now that we've both completed school, a condition we both agreed upon before marriage and children, and have began our respective careers. I think I understand your stance on love after listening for so long, on how it's actually a counterintuitive thing. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But this woman has shown me her devotion time and time again in ways I didn't think another person would. I think we can both agree that is something unbelievably rare and hard to find in our world. Great word, devotion. One that is not used at all anywhere. At least not nowadays anyway. But love without devotion is bullshit. Love without devotion isn't love, it's masturbation. But that's what most people view love as, even though they would never really admit to it. Anyway, continue on with the email. Sorry for all of that, but I just wanted to make sure the context was all there. Now, with all that said, would you personally consider me as some form of race traitor? I know the poll consensus and that I'm not helping with the falling white birth rates, but she is a faithful, God-fearing woman with strong morals and has shown me her strong motherly instincts over the years. Maybe if the white race can't be saved, a thought I really hope doesn't come to pass, and does get folded into another, maybe Japanese, Korean, etc., would be the best possible outcome. For the record, I'm not worried about my possible son turning into the next Supreme Gentleman, or my daughter the next Amelia Wang, facial abuse chick. I don't think I'm familiar with the Amelia Wang. What's your take on all of it? Thanks again for taking the time to read this and for what you do. It's not easy to wade through the cesspool of humanity, but you do give people hope, and I myself hope that you know that. God bless you and yours, and remember that the pendulum always swings back. From Nurse Dave. Some number of episodes ago, I read some screenshot about a guy who was in a relationship with an Asian woman, and he ended it, despite the fact that it was apparently a good relationship, to go with this overweight, relatively unattractive white woman in order to take one for the team and, try to pull off a demographic upset. And it ended up being that he ended up with nothing. He made some quip about how so-and-so, or her friend, was a chef at a restaurant, and he's this gay guy, and the guy just made an offhand remark about, I'll never eat there then, or something like that. And she broke up with him right then and there. I've been saying this for a long time now. Loyalty is a two-way street. You cannot be loyal to that which is not loyal to you. And for the last 100 years, that's all the white race has done. Betraying its own and extending this loyalty to refugees and immigrants for the sake of cheap labor and easy votes. And no one stops to think that maybe declining white birth rates are simply a product of this betrayal, this ongoing betrayal, and this decadence. I don't think God has forgotten about the Roaring Twenties or Weimar Germany. Or, for a more contemporary example, 21st century Western civilization, or the 2010s, to narrow it down. But it's been a long time coming. And our fate, I think, was sealed long before any of us were even born. And certainly we can blame our Hebrew cultural overlords for lobotomizing European civilization and all of its extensions, but it wouldn't be a problem if we didn't buy constantly and consistently what they sell. We gladly fly the flag of man-boy love. We gladly place the sticker of man-boy love on all of our cars. And I'm referring to the equality sticker, the blue and yellow one. You all know it. We gladly import cheap East African labor. We gladly import pirates to work in our slaughterhouses. What does your relationship have to do with that? Nothing. Like I said earlier, it's not life itself, but the quality of life. And if life is in the hands of those that will cut ties because somebody made a gay joke, I say fuck that. That's not a life worth having. Alright, next up is from Han. I see/read lots of things about how you should be proud/embrace your heritage or culture, which of course is a good thing to do. But my question this week is, what should black people look to when it comes to historical accomplishments or heritage? Compared to other races, it seems very minute. By no means is this me calling out all blacks as uncivilized people, but what sort of proud things can black people look to when they want to feel proud of their history? I'm sorry if it seems like I am putting you on the spot like this, but I would just like your input. It would greatly be appreciated. Keep on being awesome. Well, I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of black people that say that the Egyptians were black, and I mean, they possibly maybe some mixture of sub-Saharan African, but North Africans have their own genetic categories, so it's a little bit different there. But a lot of them, a lot of black nationalists, black supremacist type of people really hammer home on the point of being Mother Earth, that all life has come from Africa. And I don't know to what extent that's true, but I'm sure some very old human remains have been found in Africa. What comes to mind for me is a lot of old, early American rock and roll. A lot of that was created by blacks, and I enjoy a lot of it. So I think they are capable of creating some decent culture. Though you could argue that they are using the white man's music theory and the white man's language to do so. But that's why the cultural appropriation thing bothers me. Like, cultural appropriation is this universally terrible thing when all cultures borrow from something. We're all borrowing from caveman culture, but nobody bitches about that. So, I don't know, it's really not up to me to point out what blacks should be proud of. Alright, next up. I'm a recent high school graduate, and for my senior year I took sociology as an elective. I needed more credits, and I'm actually interested in the subject, so I thought it would be a class I'd truly enjoy. Sadly, this was not the case. My teacher was just like how you described in previous episodes, as someone who only teaches the right opinions. Right being in quotations. Sadly, he actually believed all the bullshit he was saying. I usually brushed off most of what he was saying, even though I didn't agree with it, just because I needed a good grade, unfortunately. However, one thing he said multiple times during the year really got to me. He told the whole class he could not wait until the human race is all this brown, mocha brown color. It deeply saddened me that I knew a lot of people in the class agreed with him. I never said anything to him about this, because if you say the wrong thing in public schools these days, you will receive a harsh punishment. Unfortunately, I know this from experience. I should have said something, and I feel somewhat of a regret not doing so. Why is it that liberals like him want diversity and tolerance so much, but they can't wait for the whole human race to be completely homogenous? Well, I mean, they're novelty seekers. They think that something different and new is automatically good. And interestingly enough, they think that once everybody's this shade of brown that everyone will be tolerant, when that's really not going to be the case. Tolerance is an invention of the white man, his worst invention. And even if it were possible that the human race would all become this perfectly mixed group of people, You wouldn't have tolerance. You wouldn't have these white ways of thinking in non-white populations. But thankfully, even if the white race does become extinct, the world is not going to become this brown mush of mystery meat. The Chinese are not going to roll over and die. Your various Middle Eastern Arab oligarchs aren't going to roll over and die. Because these people realize that might makes right. Something that your teacher wants to ignore for the sake of this utopian fantasy. So, take comfort in the fact that this dipshit's fantasy of what the Earth should be will never be. Next up. Thanks for keeping your great show running. I look forward to a new one every week. On your last episode, there was some discussion as to whether the people you feature are simply deviants on the fringes of society. To be honest, for a long time since coming to the right, I still believed that what happens on Tumblr stays there. And for some time, maybe that was the case. Now, though, I had the privilege of completing year one of a university arts program, and sadly, my doubts are gone. Apart from having actual Tumblrite SJWs in my classes, and these people are smart enough to go places, I got to watch our university itself actively promote all sorts of degeneracy. For example, we had a delegation at a nearby major gay parade, at a gay rave at our nightclub hosted by the uni, and as you step onto campus you are promptly greeted by a rainbow flag, proudly hanging in the window of our diversity office. Again, these things seem like they could be tame, but sadly their prominent members spout the exact same nonsense as Tumblr. As expected, very few students care or dare to oppose them. So CF, what you're demonstrating on your show has seeped into normal society, and as we know, what at first starts in dark places through our wonderful universities often finds its way into the mainstream. These people are our future. Thanks again, and God bless you. From Maple Motherland. If I'm not mistaken, I've said this before, all of these crazy, loopy ideas that these kids have, they learn them in high school. They learn them in college. And the previous email I read about the individual with the sociology class, there you go. There's more proof. This is why I have no respect for the teaching profession. This is why I have no respect for those in academia. Because look at what their profession allows. Look at what their profession promotes. You know it. I know it. But how many people ignore it? How many people don't give a shit? Next up. Good afternoon, CF. If you don't remember, I was the one who emailed you my question that you answered on episode 35. I just want to say it, you've really changed me and opened my eyes to the real filth of society with the show. Much like you were, I was also at one point an advocate of, it doesn't have to do with me, let people do what they want. I've lost that mentality a couple of years ago, but your show has really helped me with my perspective. Keep doing what you're doing, you're the best at it. I know it can be painful at times, but you've helped thousands of us, and hopefully more in the future. Also, my 20th birthday is August 7th, and I would love a shout-out. You don't have to keep me anonymous either. So, let me ask you your opinion on a few things. What type of music is your favorite, and what are some of your favorite artists? What do you think of Tool, if you've ever listened to them? Thanks again for all you do. Have a great day, my friend, from Ravage. Well, everybody wish Ravage a happy birthday. So, accept this premature happy birthday from me, and I really thank you for your words of encouragement. As for music I like, there's really not one genre of popular music that I completely dislike. There's at least a little bit from everything that I enjoy, but my favorite band is Cheap Trick. I have all their albums, and I was lucky enough to see them live some number of years ago. I like power pop, and I like punk, even though people who play punk music are the biggest retards on earth. And as for Tool, I'm not familiar with them beyond their singles and music videos, but those are cool. And that's all I have to say on it. So we'll do Ask FM questions and we'll get out of here. According to Wikipedia, without treatment, average survival time after infection with HIV is estimated to be 9 to 11 years, lol, 9/11, depending on the HIV subtype. Was there hope yet? I don't know. I try not to have too much hope because hope is a bad plan. Hope is not good. It almost always leads to disappointment. Do you think Tumblrites and self-proclaimed social justice warriors are the perfect little robots that people in positions of power have dreamed of for so long? They're so easily predictable, it's like they're pre-programmed almost. It's very sad to think about, really. I think millennials in general fit that description quite well. They represent no threat to anything, other than your sanity. Well, I mean, they do represent a threat if they decide to report you and snitch on you and dox you, but that only affects you as far as you'll let it. But yeah, they're worthless to me, but for the establishment, perfect pawns. If democracy never works, how do you explain Switzerland? Well, I don't think I've ever said that democracy never works, and if I have, I apologize for that. I've said before that I'm not opposed to democracy if it's limited to, for example, landowners. But I don't know enough about Swiss democracy to really say enough about it. But I will say this, how diverse is Switzerland? Something to think about. Is a guy who becomes worried about cuckoldry from browsing the alt-right more likely to be cucked? It's dangerously close to the whole, you're only homophobic because you are homo argument. Left a comment on the latest episode of Filth Radio, but I figured you don't read YouTube questions that often, so I'm better off asking here. I do read them, actually, I just don't. I don't like to answer questions there because a lot of the time people will ask me a question, but they'll have replies disabled. But I think the comment section is more for the listeners, more for the viewers than it is for me. After all, I have this show. But anyway, have you watched Adolf Hitler, The Greatest Story Never Told? If not, please do it. It's what turned me away from being a massive atheistical degenerate. Well, I'll do my best to check that out. And with that, I'm done. At least for now. But as always, thank you so much for listening. Thank you for sending in questions and comments. I really do appreciate it. So you all take care of yourselves. Be good to each other. Have a good one.